Lessons in the storm. We don't know just how much snow is coming, but we've got some choices to make based on the last go round.
Are we going to shut down a road before it gets to a point where it's completely blocked?
This was the day a year ago when the reality of the pandemic set in for so many, including the man who had made covering COVID his day job.
Okay, this isn't just going to be over in a week or a month.
I'll ask you what I asked him. Do we trust scientists more or less today? And were we really in it together? These two, they're in it together. I now pronounce you vaccinated. Honesty and encouragement served nightly on Next. The difference between a snowstorm that we can ooh and ah over and then joke about afterward and something that's far more serious, tragic, that is often determined on Colorado's roads when it snows. Whether we can get through what's expected to be a pretty serious storm without anybody getting stuck for hours or days in the middle of nowhere, potentially losing lives on Colorado's roads. We know that there will be highways where vehicles, despite the great confidence of their drivers, will not be able to get through. Our Marshall Zellinger asked CDOT today whether they consider closing some of those roads before that happens.
We were trying to beat the storm and made it all the way to Castle Rock. Things were good, and then the storm moved in pretty quickly.
Marie Carrico is your cautionary tale ahead of this weekend's snowstorm.
I actually thought we were a whole lot closer to Monument than we were just because the conditions got so bad.
She and her son and fashionable pup got stranded near the Greenland exit in the gap between Castle Rock and Monument during the bomb cyclone 2 years ago. That's about 15 miles past this road close gate, which is up right now. But when should it come down?
If you can remember the bomb cyclone a couple years ago, some motorists failed to heed CDOT and CSP's advice, and as a result, we had hundreds of motorists stranded within the I-25 gap area.
Sounds like it was the drivers who should have known better.
If we had people traveling two conditions and two recommendations at the time, it would have been a situation where we could have held the road open a little longer.
CDOT is warning drivers today to pretty much travel before Friday night, and that road closures are likely, just not pre-planned.
If we can anticipate a safety issue and close the road ahead of that, we absolutely will do that.
Are we going to shut down a road before it gets to a point where it's completely blocked? That's kind of a tricky question.
State Patrol does not shut down the highways. That's up to CDOT. Since the troopers are first responders to help people stranded, I asked a question that I asked before the storm 2 years ago. Should the highway get shut down while it still looks passable before drivers inevitably get stuck?
There's a lot of commerce that goes on the road. There's a lot of people that have appointments, they have jobs, they have various things. So we don't want to prematurely shut down a road or even suggest shutting down a road.
I know how I can drive, so yeah, I would have been upset.
Marie, a Colorado native, preferred having a choice 2 years ago, but is weary of others who also have a choice.
Even if you are a good driver, you do know how to drive according to conditions, other people may not, and you find yourself stuck in a situation that more or less you put yourself in because you can't control what everybody else does.
When I talk with CSP about closing a highway, I know it's beyond just the road close gate at one spot. You've got on-ramps and off-ramps, and that's part of the issue with CSP and CDOT trying to man areas that even if they do have a gate, make sure no one goes around it, or if it doesn't have a gate, make sure nobody gets on a road that shouldn't be there. And then you have the problem with plowing it. Once you've closed it, it doesn't just miraculously, oh, there's no cars on it, so people can drive on it. You have to plow it and clear it. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm learning when I ask questions like this, kind of like when I asked last year, Kyle, and we heard CDOT say, yeah, we keep the road open for the ski resorts.
Yeah. Marshall, you're learning. I'm learning. I feel like I was today years old when I learned that CSP does not close down a road, that it's CDOT that does that as opposed to a trooper saying, hey, this is no good. And also, can I just say that Marie's comment is the most Colorado thing I've heard today, where she's like, well, yeah, I mean, I want the road closed to the other drivers, but not to me.
And when we talked before I did the actual interview, she referenced certain states, which I won't mention, California, and that it was neat to meet Marie because I found her from 2 years ago when we interviewed her, and I reached out, hey, random person, can you talk with me? We went to middle school together in Aurora. That was great.
Oh, that's cool. Well, small world. We hope she and everybody else are safe this weekend. Thank you, Marshall. So tonight, you heard President Joe Biden just direct all states to make all American adults eligible for the COVID vaccines by the beginning of May. Colorado's goal is actually slightly more ambitious than that, end of April. Almost 12% of Colorado is fully vaccinated right now. Another 8% are halfway there. And if you really want to be optimistic, and hey, why not tonight? You got to figure about 20% of the state's population is too young to be vaccinated. We've included them in the dark blue. So if you look at it that way, 40% of us are on the way there right now. Our positivity rate yesterday was an even 3%. Our weekly average is 3.2%. That's good. We've been hovering around that number for the last couple of weeks. So I was talking with our COVID coverage guy, Chris Vanderveen, about where we were 1 year ago today. He said that was kind of the day when, things got real. I think back to this time a year ago when we were just starting to say things like, we're in this together. That phrase echoes in my mind so much. I think the more that I've come to understand that it's not true at all.
No, and I worry about how it sort of exposes those sort of pre-existing fissures that already existed in society anyways. And those fissures have become wider. We're talking about populations that have been hit harder. We're talking about groups of people that have escaped really largely untouched and people who haven't. This has been economic. This has been physical. This has been mental. So many aspects of this, and yet you're absolutely right. Some people have felt this incredibly acutely. They know the direct pain of loss. They've seen it themselves, and other people haven't.
It was 1 year ago tonight that I asked people to consider epidemiologists and doctors to be like the firefighters of the medical world who are trying to get our attention about an emerging threat. Right now there is a fire. It is small and it is growing, and the firefighters are banging on our door. When I look back at that, Chris, I don't know that there's any more faith and trust in science and research and medicine than there was a year ago today, despite what all of those people have done to save lives since then.
I worry, Kyle, that there's actually less trust in the system today than there was back then. At least back then, everyone could sort of admit there was a whole host of things that we didn't know. And yes, we could sort of like look at those people and say, oh, but it's just the flu, and sort of look at them and say, absolutely it's not. We know that it's not the flu. We know it's going to be worse than the flu. And we could sort of cast them aside. Now we have a whole host of people that simply don't want to believe science, that simply don't want to believe what people who have spent their entire lives researching and telling and looking into these things are telling us and warning us about. And then there are people that simply are scared to take a vaccination because of things that they heard on the internet. There's been a lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation out there, and I worry that it's actually worse now.
That was some real talk, if not particularly positive. My full conversation with Chris on the next YouTube channel also includes our hopes for unity in 2021, as well as our predictions for this day 1 year from now. This pandemic has postponed and changed a lot of weddings, and you'd be forgiven for mistaking this for a couple leaving their small ceremony. Nope, Cindy and her husband have actually been married a while. They decided to put cans behind their truck and drive through Ridgeway to celebrate being just vaccinated. They busted out the Happy New Year's tiaras. They made a whole public deal out of this. I could not love this anymore. You know how many people must have seen that and smiled? They asked if we showed these pictures, would we please give a public shout out to everyone who has gotten the shot, everyone who will get the shot, and everyone who continues to protect their neighbors by wearing masks.
When you're on unemployment, you cannot make the right decision on, do I pay electricity, do I pay for food? I mean, the prescription has to be made.
What are we doing as a country and as a state if people are forced to choose between food and medication? There's an idea at the state capitol that could shake up the system. There was also a filibuster under the Gold Dome today of something so controversial it had to be stopped.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we all want to hear the 108-page report, so if you could keep it down, we'll be able to hear it better.
What was this dangerous idea that had to be filibustered? Media literacy. That's next. There are people in Colorado choosing between groceries and paying for the meds they need to stay alive. Legislators have a new idea to take on Big Pharma. They insist that this plan is legal, but they know that it's going to draw a big fight. Here's Anusha Roy.
Every month recently has been a struggle.
One prescription that we have to pay in order to keep her alive.
Matthew James said his family needs to get Xarelto, a blood thinner for his wife.
If she isn't on blood thinners, then she clots up in her lungs.
With insurance, it costs around $258 a month. Then Matthew lost his job in the pandemic. It went up to $450 a month with a discount card. The generic drug doesn't suit his wife, so he says they need to get Xarelto.
Decide what groceries we want to do or what other bills we have to pay.
His story is shared by so many people in Colorado. The Colorado Consumer Health Initiative estimates 1 out of 3 people in the state are skipping doses, cutting pills, or not filling prescriptions because of the cost, which is why some state lawmakers have proposed setting up a prescription drug affordability review board.
We recognize that research and development costs are sometimes part of the equation, but also those are often research projects paid for by the NIH or universities. And if they're found to be unaffordable, this board will be able to set upper payment limits on the price of drugs.
And how would the board have the authority to do that?
So we've been looking at this, and we feel pretty confident that the approach we're taking meets legal muster on this. There are certain things that fall under interstate commerce.
If this feels familiar, it's because lawmakers have tackled this issue before.
Biggest efforts, though, that have fallen short have been cost transparency efforts. Pharmaceutical industry has opposed those transparency bills every year that I've been here.
Democratic Representative Kennedy said many times those bills have stalled. And as confident as the lawmakers are about their legal grounds this year, they are also ready for a fight.
Getting threatened with lawsuits by big corporate interests is nothing new at the legislature.
Okay, so we looked up who has signed up to lobby against this proposed bill, and it is the who's who of the pharma world. We are talking about all of the big names, Kyle, already gearing up to try to stop this bill, and it was just introduced a couple of days ago.
And I imagine they'll say, Anusha, if you cap the price of our drugs, we'll pull them out. People won't get them.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of the concerns we were hearing about today, right? So if a manufacturer says, okay, you're messing with the payment here, we're just not going to sell it in Colorado, they have to give the state a heads up. But the board has to take accessibility into account, right? Because the last thing you want to do is create a situation where people can't get the meds they need. So not every drug that's reviewed is going to see that payment limit, and all of those factors, Kyle, are going to have to be taken into account. I did want to give a quick update about Matthew. He does have a new job, but it doesn't come with insurance, so they're still in that same position where they're struggling every month with those payments.
All right, we'll follow this closely. Thank you to Anusha, and kudos to every viewer who spotted the old friend in the background. Republicans at the state capitol today filibustered a media literacy bill. It was a bipartisan effort to encourage schools to teach students how to be critical consumers of media, how to research and fact check, compare sources, and how to responsibly produce their own media based on accuracy and fairness. A Republican representative filibustered, reading the bill aloud to slow down the process that Republicans may not have the votes to stop altogether.
Write engaging real or imagined narratives, effectively using techniques such as relevant description, sensory language, dialogue, and logical pacing to capture the action and detail experiences and events.
Are you finished, Representative Blank, or should
May I pause this riveting reading? And
it was a riveting reading, but I think the Madam Majority Leader wishes to be called upon if
yes,
that's acceptable.
I think she would like to have a chance to speak.
So full disclosure, 2 years ago, a Next viewer asked if I would serve on a citizen advisory committee coming up with suggestions around media literacy education. Parents and teachers, librarians, journalists, and other citizens, we met over several months and created a report that we turned over to the legislature for them to do with however they wished. I don't have a position on the bill. I do have a position and an idea about media literacy. Media literacy is not partisan or ideological. It's a basic life skill, the ability to look critically at sources of information, and guidance on how to produce information for other people that's based on facts, not stuff that's made up. If you're one of those people that thinks that there are real problems with the media today, and I agree with you, encouraging media literacy in young people is going to train a whole new generation to identify those issues with the media and hold us accountable. But media literacy and critical thinking begin with what has become a controversial premise, that reality and facts exist. Protecting Coloradans without a roof over their head during the storm. A Next viewer asks a simple question: what can we all do to help? And it is some baby mama drama of the feathered variety. Next.
We've got 24 hours to get it done, whatever you need to get done before this big weekend storm moves in. The low will be south of Las Vegas tomorrow, Four Corners area Saturday, and then the snow really picks up Saturday night into Sunday as it sets up in southeastern Colorado. We go into a winter storm warning for 12 to 24 inches of snow, but in the foothill areas, it's going to be 2 to 4 feet of snow. And some of the accumulation will be lighter off to the east, where the rain will mix with snow. In Denver, for tonight, we do have a quiet evening with an isolated rain or snow shower tomorrow, but it's tomorrow night. Snow picks up, turning heavy at times, winds down Sunday night, and then we get a break Monday. A few more snow showers in the forecast Tuesday, and don't forget Sunday, the beginning of daylight saving time.
Our next question comes to us from a viewer named Joe. Joe says he and his wife were discussing what's being done ahead of the storm for people in Denver who are homeless and how Next viewers might be able to help. Good question. Good heart, Joe. Thank you for both. City is prepping a standby shelter for men at the St. Charles Rec Center. They're also talking about the potential of maybe getting some motel rooms for women if that's needed. The Denver Rescue Mission told us today that they're stocking their 2 24-hour shelters with the essentials needed to get through the weekend. Both the 48th Avenue Center and the Holly Center will be ready to take in a total of 473 men. Rescue Mission is also making plans to turn their daytime shelter at the St. Lawrence Street Community Center into an overnight setup if that's needed. Samaritan House is preparing to take in women and families and provide them with hot meals. Both those organizations told us they could use donations of blankets and cold weather clothing. If you have those, there are details on how to link up with the Rescue Mission and Samaritan House to donate on their websites. It has been a while since we updated you on the steamy soap opera playing out in the air above Stanley Lake. Last we tuned in to the daytime drama here on Nest, a female eagle had attacked our eagle couple, driven off the mama bird, and shacked up with dad. In the months since, the father eagle and the home wrecker, dubbed F420, female, April 2020, they have settled into domestic bliss. They built a new home together. They then lost that nest and moved back into an old nest before the female laid 2 eggs a bit more than a week ago. If all goes well with this drama, those eggs will hatch toward the end of April, and we will present to you another episode of As the Nest Turns. All right, what has 6 legs and 1 wheel? It's the most Colorado thing we saw today, and it's next. One wheel, 4 paws, can't lose. And it is the most Colorado thing we saw today. Dude out for a one-wheeled ride in Frisco with his dog along for the walk. This would appear to take tremendous concentration, balance, and a very well-behaved dog, because just like one squirrel and you are off to the unicycle races. Our thanks to Thomas for sending us that photo. A lot of you today wanted to talk about that commentary that aired on Next 1 year ago today, about epidemiologists being the firefighters at our door, banging for our attention as the pandemic spread. Cody Gosho wrote, wild that it's been a year. He said that he remembered showing that commentary to his family, trying to convince them of how serious it was going to be. Sabrina wrote in to say that she remembers that broadcast clearly. Thanks for being a voice of sanity over the last year. Adele, not that Adele, different Adele, says, are you wearing the same clothes tonight as you did a year ago? Thought it would be a good way to judge how last year has aged a bunch of us, huh? See you next time.